I'd like to call to order this Lancaster County Council Committee of the Whole. We have a workshop here today, and welcome everyone here today. My plan is to keep this thing moving. We've got a lot to cover, and my target is to be out of here by 6 o'clock. We'll do no official business. I feel sure there'll be a lot of questions and a lot of questions to leave staff with to have us answers in our next council meeting, possibly. And with that, would you please rise and join Council Member Charlie McGriff as she leads us in our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Lord, as we move into this committee meeting, we ask that you guide us in the right direction, that we will make the decisions that's best for Lancaster County. We ask you to protect and wrap your arms around our citizens during this COVID-19 period. I ask you this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Let's move on down to number 4, approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt and second from Mr. Blackman. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Any citizens' no citizens' comments, so let's get right into our discussion and action items. Some of these will have a lot more discussion than other ones. Let's go with 6A, Mr. Burhan's discussion of the Redwood Development Agreement. EA 020-2650.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Okay, today I would like to discuss with you the development agreement for the Redwood project, DA 020-2650. The request is to enter into a development agreement with the county in association with a 37-acre rezoning to professional business. In this instance, the development agreement is not a required element of the rezoning. The applicant is proposing it just to help facilitate the rezoning and provide an opportunity to address any impacts that the council may see that can't be mitigated through the conventional rezoning process. The underlying intent of the project is to develop a 155-unit rental community consisting of 3 and 4 family apartment units on, again, 37 acres. The density would be roughly 4 units per acre. And when I say 3 or 4 family dwellings, I mean like triplexes and quadruplex type building arrangements. The subject property is located on Harrisburg Road, approximately 500 feet away from the intersection of Barberville Road. Just to make sure we all are familiar with the location, the subject property is outlined in blue there, again, right near the vicinity of Harrisburg Road and Barberville Road. The subject property does not include the area I've highlighted in yellow. That if the rezoning were to be approved and they acquire the property, they are not going to acquire roughly 14 acres directly at the intersection. The existing landowner wants to retain that acreage and maybe come back with a future rezoning request of their own, possibly for commercial, more traditional commercial uses. So I would like to go ahead and share with you the concept plan for the Redwood project. Again, it is triplex and quadruplex building arrangements, and the intent of the project is, while this is a rental community, it's intended to be low-story construction. So these are 1-story units, and when you drive through the neighborhood, it would have conventional-looking streets. So it would actually they're trying to create a neighborhood feel through the community, but do so with provide a rental opportunity that is not necessarily just a garden apartment. So this is something you've seen before with other projects recently. I think the lodges had similar elements to this project, and so wanted just to outline that for you. So in terms of prior review of this project, members of the former INR committee may remember seeing this project just in very brief form at their February meeting. Just again, staff brought it in to see, is this a concept that might be viable? And so we just got some informal discussion and feedback, no decisions or recommendations made. This project was taken up at the December 2020 Planning Commission meeting, where the Planning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend approval of the development agreement. Staff also supported that recommendation. As part of our DA process that we've talked about in the past, we think it's really important to have our division heads review individual development agreements and the locations that they're occurring to see if there's any immediate facility needs. The division heads got together on this one, and really, it's in a unique area of the county where we didn't see an immediate need for, public facility needs, like hey, do we need an EMS station here? Do we need a fire station here? Is there a convenience site that might be needed? Staff has also shared the impact fee study with the applicant and just advised that may serve as a baseline to start the rooftop fee amounts if that is proposed for the development agreement. We do have the applicant here this evening, or this afternoon rather. Mr. Bob Dyer is in the audience, and he's excited to introduce himself and talk more about the project, and can also talk about any proposed fees. So this afternoon, as the chairman indicated, we're not asking you for any kind of a decision. We just want to take in any questions you have, either for the applicant or for staff. And ultimately, we do feel like this may be ready to be placed on the March 8th council agenda for first reading, along with its parallel rezoning, and there's a text amendment also accompanying it. So I will make myself available for any questions, but also remind you that Mr. Dyer is here to share a few words as well and take questions. Thank you.
My only question is, this is currently zoned, what did I say?
LDR, low density residential.
It's got to be rezoned, or it's been rezoned?
Yes. The reason
Low
the
density.
development agreement is before us is because there's going to be a rezoning from LDR to professional business.
Professional business.
Professional business allows the triplex and quadruplexes.
The only concern I have is, when I had to meet with Lancaster County Water and Sewer the other week, and what they designed for Indian land was 2.5 units per acre. And a lot of these projects and apartments that we have went way over. So that's my biggest concern is density.
Okay.
Well, if there's no questions of staff, I'll invite Mr. Dyer to come up and introduce himself and tell you. Oh, I'm sorry,
All right.
Mr. Mustard, do you have a question?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. But I'll invite the applicant.
I do have a question. So in the development agreement, there's a rooftop fee? Is that correct? Is that what's going to be in there?
There is an opportunity to ask for a rooftop fee with this development agreement.
All right,
Yes.
is there going to be a school fee too?
That is up to the applicant to propose. We have not had any discussions about a school fee, but that is certainly, if that's something the council is interested in, they could share that as part of this dialogue.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And I'll invite Mr. Dyer to come up and say a few words with Redwood.
Thanks, Rox. I was going to wait until, although, you know what? Here, go ahead. Thanks. Mr. Chairman, members of council, my name is Bob Dyer with Redwood Living. I think you had a late meeting last night, and I've been told numerous times by Rox to keep this really short, and that's usually difficult for me to do. But what I thought I'd do is, I have about 12 bullet points. I'll read down those bullet points. It'll tell you a little bit about the company, what we do, who our clients are, and then I'll be available for questions. We are a unique apartment neighborhood developer. Our founder, we've been in business since 1991. Our founder wanted to create an environment that provided folks with all the benefits of home ownership without all the headaches. And that's what we've tried to do. As Rox noted, our buildings are single story. No one lives above, no one lives below you. A few other things, each dwelling has an attached two-car garage. The kitchens are set up, they're eat-in kitchens. There's a walk-in pantry. The master bedroom has a walk-in closet. We have vaulted ceilings, a lot of things that make it feel more like a single-family home than a typical garden-style apartment. So let me run through these bullet points real quickly. We've been in business, I said, since 1991. We now own and manage 13,000 dwelling units across 8 states. Everything we have ever built since 1991, we continue to own. We don't flip our properties. Our rental rate range, if we were to be leasing our product today in this neighborhood, we'd be between $1,500 and $2,000 a month rental rate. A significant portion of the folks that are going to call our neighborhood home are going to come from a 3-mile radius around the development. That has been what's happened in the past. As I mentioned, these are single-story. Every dwelling has a 2-car attached garage, and it's zero clearance entry into the dwelling. As Rox mentioned, we have no buildings with more than 4 dwellings within them. We're at a significantly lower density than a typical garden-style apartment. I think we are actually at 4.14 dwellings per acre. From the school standpoint, school districts love us because we're really oriented towards empty nester, active adults. Across all of our neighborhoods, we average 12 school-aged children for every 100 dwellings. The largest group, as I mentioned, the largest group of the folks that call our neighborhoods home are empty nesters and active adults, followed by young professionals. The average age of our residents is in the low 50s, about 51 years old. There's about 1.5 folks per dwelling across our portfolio. Our traffic generation, because of this, is typically significantly lower than single-family or even a higher density multi-family. And our peak periods of traffic generation, it's a little bit later in the morning than the typical rush hour, and it's a little earlier in the evening than the typical rush hour. We are a net income generator for the school. Somebody had mentioned the school district. If we look at taxes that we're currently paying down in the Greenville area on some of our communities, and we look at the tax rate in Lancaster County in our location, we would be a net generator of revenue on an annual basis to the schools of $100,000. That's after you take out, the school district has estimated, I think it's about $5,300 per student to educate. We cover those costs, and in addition, there's an additional $100,000 that we generate every year for the schools. Let's see, our leasing office, we have a full-time leasing person and a full-time maintenance man. Essentially, it's 24/7. The leasing agent typically, and the maintenance man typically live within the community. Last but not least, speaking of the impact fee, the current impact fee that the county is studying for this type of product would be $1,430 per dwelling unit, and we would be agreeable to that. Now, I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you. Any discussion, not this one. All right, we're ready to move on? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion of Poovey Development Agreement, Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Okay, this afternoon, we're going to be talking about another development agreement in association with the Poovey development. The applicant is LGI Homes, South Carolina, and the underlying request is to enter into a development agreement with Lancaster County for development of a 275-acre property that requires a rezoning to the medium-density residential zoning district in association with developing a 590-lot cluster subdivision neighborhood. And so as the council is aware, with the cluster subdivision ordinance, we do require development agreements as part of that process. The overall development, again, 274 acres, 590 lots, you get a density of roughly 2.15 units per acre. The subject property is located at 2862 Charlotte Highway, right at the intersection of 521 and Shiloh Unity. It's nearby the Motor Speedway as well as the new recently constructed Dollar General on 521. Again, to familiarize everyone with the site layout, it is a little bit of a busy map, but it's the blue outline there. The current zoning is LDR, and again, they want to zone to MDR. If you see the subject property, there's a red GB zone that's kind of punching into the property. That's the racetrack. On the racetrack, I'm sure everyone's familiar, we have a convenience center site that we do lease and have for some time. In terms of the, with all of our development agreements, we do require a concept plan. This is the concept plan that they have shared of how they would like to develop the property. Again, just to orient everyone, you have the intersection of 521 and Shiloh Unity and the kind of towards the upper left-hand side. I think you can see the outline of the racetrack as well. And so in terms of the cluster subdivision overlay that they've plan that they've created, this is an area where staff does have some concerns, and these concerns were shared by Planning Commission. And I'll talk about the recommendation in a few minutes. But while there is support, I think for the creation of an MDR district here, we think that this specific plan needs kind of further refinement as it relates to its proximity to the racetrack. I think the racetrack's been here since the 1950s. There's great familiarity with it. It's a great amenity to the area and provides a lot of entertainment for the community, but without question, it is very loud. Without question, it produces significant amounts of dust. It's a dirt track. There's also possibly even lighting spillover. And we believe that the concept plan that has been presented so far has not adequately mitigated against those impacts. And so we believe that some more time and attention is needed, as well as possibly engaging a subject matter expert that is familiar with mitigating nuisances and actually providing specific recommendations. So the Planning Commission considered this item at their January 19th meeting, where they did unanimously recommend approval of the development agreement. Again, they agreed with staff that we need to be looking at mitigation strategies for sound, dust, and lighting impacts. The vision heads reviewed this as part of our standard DA process. One area that was identified was a need for a new convenience center site in this location. As I mentioned, the current site is a lease site, and it's not. As I understand it, is undersized and gets a lot of traffic. It's also not available for expansion or for purchase. The property owner does not wish to sell the property. So the county needs to be looking at a new convenience center site in this area. It was recognized that at 590 lots, they're going to be putting a fair amount of traffic into this convenience center, and so that there may be a reasonable request to ask for the developer to help the county with this challenge that it has. The impact fee study has been shared with the applicant and as a baseline for any rooftop fees, and I'll ask them to specifically address their willingness to engage in providing rooftop fees as part of their presentation. The applicant representative is here this evening. I think his name is Mr. Robert Tripp, and he can provide more information about the project and discuss any fees. Certainly, just a question is, does the council have any questions for the applicant or for staff? Any more information that might be helpful. But again, what may be different than the Redwood project is staff is recommending that this not go before first reading of council at present. As I mentioned earlier, we believe that the site plan, the concept plan, isn't ready yet, and that they need to, again, invest some more time and attention into developing mitigation strategies for the racetrack's impacts. What are the strategies? Well, we'll wait and see, but, it's presently a 590 lot community. Well, maybe it's not a 590 lot community any longer, and maybe it needs to have less units, because there's so many, up close against the track. Maybe there needs to be some site reconfigurations. Maybe there needs to be some buffering strategies. You're not going to make it perfect. I mean, it's that loud, as I'm told, but we need to see. I think we all want to see a greater effort and have maybe some folks who do this for a living come up with specific recommendations. There's a cell tower on the site, and we just need verification that the fall zone is not going to fall onto a residential lot. The cell tower is on the racetrack site. So, and also the TIA needs further discussion. That's still an active discussion between the applicant, the county's consultant, and SCDOT, and it's not ready to be finalized. So we do ask that this not be moved forward to the March agenda for first reading. Give the applicant more time to work on a better plan that's better suited to the surrounding environment. That's our recommendation. The council does have the ability to shape the site plan and provide guidance through the development agreement process. That is a tool that you have in your tool belt, and that's one of the strengths of having these development agreements. And we would just recommend you exercise that tool with your, as part of this process. And I'll certainly make myself available for any questions. And again,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Tripp is here.
Go ahead, Ms. McCray.
I know this is in Larry's district, right, Larry? This is your district, right?
No,
Presently.
that's not my district, that's Terry's.
It's your district. My question is, how close is the rooftops to the end of the Speedway property? Because it's pretty close in there.
So you have, if you
You can pull it up, not much over 300 foot.
Okay. And as you said, they're loud. I live a mile or so down the road, and I can hear them at night.
Sure.
So it's just going to be really, really noisy. I don't know. I think I read somewhere where it's going to be buffers and some suggestions of buffers, or maybe a wall or something that you can put there. But Terry,
Yeah, I mean, I think your comments are right. I don't think it's ready for us to proceed because I think the whole council is concerned, one, about the noise and the dust, and if you're 300 feet away from a dirt track, that noise abatement is not, I don't know what you would do. I'm not the expert, but I do have done some research in noise. I don't know how you would do that. I mean, you'd have to come, I guess, a sound wall or something like that. But I also would like there to be some kind of mechanism, and this is a legal question probably, to say that anybody that buys a house or sells a house in that area signs some kind of disclosure that says, hey, we're next to racetrack, we're going to have noise and we're going to have abatement, and we can't sue the county or we can't sue the racetrack because of a nuisance.
John can certainly take in that feedback. I will say from my experience, you see similar processes from homes being built around airports, where they're in the transfer of real estate, there are disclosure documents similar to what you're describing, and that may be a useful template for this matter.
yeah. I guess the only thing here is racing seasonal. I don't know.
I got their schedule right here. They start 1st of March, the last one is December
That's 9
4th.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as I understand, it's mostly on Saturdays.
Yeah, but then
That's not correct?
No, I live about, as the crow flies, about a mile from that track. I knew it was there when I built my house. I have been going there myself for years and years and years. It's always been a good family-oriented place as far as I'm concerned. I've took my girls there many times. My concern is that when this is built, I get calls right now. It's hardly a week goes by I don't get a call about the racetrack. What can you do about the noise? I said, absolutely nothing. Because it was there before you ever came here. Wherever you came from, they were here. And that's the way I feel about it. We got to make sure that the racetrack is protected. But I'm thinking getting 500 residents here together and start complaining as a body might cause very bad harm to the racetrack, and I'm opposed to that. They have been here and been a good neighbor for many, many years, and I don't want to see them.
And I suspect, Mr. Honeycutt, that since they cut the trees down there, you've gotten a lot more calls.
Oh, yeah, no question, no question.
Well, I'd just like to say that, first of all, when I heard about this, I just thought it was insanity of some sort coming up, and why would anybody want to put this many lots around that racetrack? I do not and never have been to the racetrack, but I certainly believe that it has been an institution in this county, and I do believe that, Mr. Honeycutt, it'll be more than 590 residents. It'll be like at least 1,200 voters, and potentially we're putting future councils into a headache situation if this were to be approved, because when those people move in, they now have a voting block to want to fight the speedway. And I'm going to have to see a lot more buffering, or I'm going to have to be convinced by somebody that's experts in noise mitigation that this is a good idea. Otherwise, my tendency is going to be to leave it low-density residential. And being an armchair quarterback on Monday morning, as it comes to planning, you know, I sure wish we would have come up with a way to put more commercial around that speedway that would have been sort of a buffer to neighboring houses that might go in later. But that's hindsight, and hindsight's 20/20. But right now, I cannot support this.
Mr. Graham, they do practice up there some during the week at nights, and I have sat outside on my pad at the house and listened to them, but it doesn't bother me because I knew it was there when I built, and I've learned to just ignore it, you know, and.
You get used to it, you hear it, and you say, oh, that's the racetrack.
I would like to see a plan for the dust abatement, the noise, you know, because a 50-foot buffer, you know, is not going to work. And like I say, it's been there since 1954. I hadn't been in many years, but I used to go when I was younger. But these houses will be closer than people sitting in the stands.
Yeah.
With the plan that's presented here. And if I were to support it, it would have to be some kind of documentation that, you know, because I remember up in Indian Land, a concrete plant, people, what they were griping about was when they were unloading the rocks and slamming the back door, the back gate on the truck. I can't imagine this. You wouldn't be able to, this neighborhood, part of these houses, you wouldn't be able to watch TV at night, the way it's designed now.
That commercial where the older couple sitting there and got the little headphones in their ear, that's what everybody in that neighborhood had to have. Exactly. I mean, you could put a 200-foot New Jersey barrier up around the whole thing, and it ain't gonna help a bit.
It's not gonna work.
So, to address one of council's stated concerns, I will say Section 6, 3160 of the Development Agreement Act states that within the agreement there can be a description of any conditions, terms, restrictions, or other requirements determined to be necessary by the local government for the public health, safety, or welfare of its citizens. So certainly making provision for noise abatement and dust abatements wholly within y'all's authority in the context of the development agreement. Additionally, to one of Mr. Honeycutt's statements, there is a defense to nuisance actions based around coming to a nuisance. If a issue exists and you decide to build next to it, the laws basically say, well, you knew it was there, you can't complain. That's cold comfort to y'all's point if there's 1,200 voters there that don't care about that common law kind of defense theory on nuisance. But that said, I do think that there are provisions within the act that could require disclosures to future property owners in there, and also require noise and dust abatement. Again, if the project even ultimately meets with y'all's approval, those conditions could be attached, but that remains to be seen.
All right.
Okay. I would just like to provide the applicant maybe just a few minutes to come up and if they desire and just introduce themselves.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Like I said, I'm Robert Tripp. I'm with Merrick, here representing LGI today. I'm not going to cover the racetrack much. You've hit on all the same points LGI is discussing right now. They've tried twice to go out and actually see the track during a race event, but unfortunately got rained out the 2 times they were able to try. But it's something they're interested in seeing too. They want to see firsthand. What does this thing look like up close? What does it look like from a mile away? I completely agree. Noise is...
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh,
sir.
sorry. Noise is a hard thing to abate, and I understand that, but you are correct. We are going to look at options for trying to do the best we can to abate it, to readjust the site to provide more buffering if walls are needed or something to that effect. We're going to try to, like you said, reach out to some folks and try to get some ideas, as well as just, like I said, take a look at it and try to get a feel for ourselves. This is definitely the top issue right now that they're trying to debate on whether this is going to make or break them for trying to get this development in place. The other thing that came up during plan review that's a little bit of a subject right now is the Water and Sewer District has asked for 10 acres for a sewer equalization basin on this property. And I believe my understanding is they have targeted it, or it has been looked at in the past just because of its relation down to the floodplain as an area that would be good for it. They've asked to acquire 10 acres. We just kind of need a little more help from staff and council as to what does acquire mean? Is it an outright purchase? Is it a trade for fees in lieu? How do we get to a position where, maybe we can help them out to get them the 10 acres they need on the property for that equalization basin? So that's another task right now that we need to try to work out. It's going to be a lot lost to them, and obviously there's a price of a lot that goes with that, and not only with the land loss. So that's another one. The 2-acre solid waste facility, that did not come up in plan review, but as he mentioned, it has been discussed in emails and some conversation. They have a little bit of hesitance on that as well. We'd like to sort of have some more conversations on that and talk about where does it look like position to the development. Traffic into the facility versus traffic into the development. How do they mix? Other things, is it going to be a spot that can be buffered and not be unsightly to the development and cause a loss of value to the development? But we're certainly willing to talk through those items and entertain it, but just to know that's something that's a little bit of a touchy issue right now in terms of trying to get this thing sited in the development. The impact fees, they're obviously willing to pay the impact fees that are fair and that are required. We've heard rumor, however, that with the school fee on top, they could be somewhere in the $11,000 to $12,000 range. We're aware of other developments in the area that are paying substantially less than that. And so obviously you can imagine it's a little bit of an issue for them to have a $9,000, $8,000 plus per lot fee that they've got to try to cover compared to other developments in the area.
That hadn't come from county.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
throw it out there and we can discuss it,
Okay,
and that's
no,
just part of the
that's-
negotiation process.
I don't know where you got that information from, but
Okay.
The staff, anybody can address that. That's not true.
Okay. I'm just putting it out there for discussion. But
Okay.
I hear you. So there are quite a few things we're still trying to nail down ourselves. You mentioned some of the issues with the concept plan that we're working through in regards to the racetrack. But outside of that, those are probably the 4 or 5 hot button items that we still need some help on to get to where they are comfortable even proceeding with this development. I have talked to Lancaster County staff. We have had a meeting on the 10-acre equalization basin. There's a little more work we need to do between ourselves and the Lancaster County staff on that one. We know that's the case. And so, as he mentioned, we're really going to take this next couple of weeks or time period to try to work with them and hammer down a little more concrete what some of these items are and get to where, we all have a good comfort level of where we stand on what's actually going to be required for this development and what it's going to mean to them in terms of trying to get this development off the ground. So if there are any other questions, I can try to entertain some of those. But that's sort of a status update, I'll say, for where we stand right now with the project.
I don't think I will have any until we know what the plans are and whether you meet some of those requirements.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on down to bid for replacement of fire apparatus, Elgin Engine 601, Mr. Willis, Mr. Blair.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, I'm going to make some preliminary remarks and then turn it over to the apparatus committee with the fire commission. They were the folks that actually prepared specifications. I think most of y'all familiar, Engine 601 assigned to the Elgin Fire Department had a pretty serious wreck a while back and was totaled out. You know, thank goodness it was custom built. Firefighter did not receive any serious injuries. If it had been commercial chassis, we might have had a dead firefighter. I cannot thank y'all enough for the past practice of the custom-built trucks. But it put us in a position we've got to replace 601 off-cycle. This is the first one we've had a problem with. We've had to replace off-cycle. I think most of y'all are familiar with. Every 7 years, we go through and we have a large bond issue and generally buy our apparatus that way. The question had come up about some of the specifications again. I'll certainly turn it over to the experts on that. We did send it out, same as we do always. It's on Skibo, advertised publicly. Did have an attachment. We had 19 different vendors that it was mailed to directly. So we had a fairly large list that we sent it out to. We did only have one response. The one bid was $617,425. Note that the price increase that was noted in there effective January 31st, it was not by the vendor, it was by the manufacturer. They've agreed to hold that off until the end of February. So that's delayed to February 28th. There is an option to prepay. That's certainly at the discretion of council. If you prepay, you have some savings. If we prepay, we'd have to look at fund balance to fund the balance of the cost of the truck. If we don't, we'll just program it into next year's budget. With that said, I'll turn it over to the apparatus commission. I would note that all of our bid packages, just standard verbiage, have language in there that if anybody that's, reads it, receives it, whatever, they take exception to something, they think, this is a little too specific for a bid, they have the right to, declare, I'm seeking an exception on this.
I just have a issue with, I don't understand how we can have a piece of equipment that we only get one bid on is $600,000 plus. That concerns me. When I read some of these specifications, and I had somebody else to look at them, and I just have some.
Yes, sir. And I think the apparatus committee will be able to answer those questions for you. The other thing I would note that, any vendor can say, my equipment is equivalent or superior, submit it, prove it. Yeah, that's standard. It doesn't matter if we're buying hammers or fire trucks. That's just, if it's bid, that's just standard verbiage in our procurement. It's been a long time since I bought a fire truck, back when I was with the city fire department. I said, it's strange. I learned a long time ago, if you want a steering wheel on a fire truck, your specifications better doggone well say there's a steering wheel.
At this time, if we don't do anything, we'll have to bid it back out, because I don't see the money there right now. We would have to bid it back out after June or whatever for next year. Because how much you're talking? Close to $400,000?
The balance is $367,425, unless we take advantage of the prepayment. Reduces it by $16,000.
Let me ask questions. Are all fire engines standard when it comes to specifications?
No, ma'am.
So why is, out of I'm like, Steve, why is it out of 19 vendors, only one met those specifications unless we wrote the specifications directly for that particular company?
Let me let the apparatus commission talk about that, the apparatus committee, because they're more familiar with that. Like I said, it's been a long time, it's been 20 years since I brought a fire truck. But it's not like going up saying, I want a Ford or a Chevy or whatever. There's nothing standard on a fire truck.
And
Everything
I
comes out as
understand that,
custom
so
built.
when Darren and them come up, I want them to explain why this one fire truck out of 19 vendors could not meet those specifications. I could understand 3, 2, 3, but only 1?
Steve, one quick question for you. You said it's been a long time since you bought a fire truck.
Yes, sir.
We haven't bought fire trucks in the last, for the county in 5
Well,
years, or?
What I'm saying, it's been a long time since I was actually on an apparatus specification committee back
Okay.
at City Fire.
When was the last time
we-
we bought a fire truck?
We bought fire trucks, approximately 5 years ago for our second round, 7 prior to that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes, sir. About every 7 years, we're buying, and it's a mixture of pumpers, rescues, and tankers.
Is it all from the same company?
The last 2 have been, yes, ma'am.
That might be the problem right there, because you're meeting the
Well,
specifications
I'm
of
sure,
that.
I'm sure a lot of folks know that, you have departments that are happy with their apparatus, and, are they gonna go through the trouble of proving their specifications equal? Back when I was with the city, we had a mixture of trucks, but we had a lot of KME trucks, and people knew that, department was pretty happy with KME. Currently, the fire commission's looked at this, and they've put an awful lot of time and effort into it, and the last 2 bids have gone to Pierce. And I'm sure that a lot of the vendors know that, we've bought Pierce the last 2 times, and there's some satisfaction with Pierce. I'll be the first to tell you, it's same as we have out at Fleet Maintenance with the heavy equipment, Mack dump trucks and the Caterpillar. I could really care less what on earth they buy, as long as they try to stick with one thing, because that way you're cutting down on your maintenance, you're cutting down on your parts, you're cutting down on your training. And you'll hear some of these folks talk about, it's pretty important if you have a large fire and somebody from McDonald Green is trying to go up to the Indian Land truck and try to operate that truck, they're familiar with it because it's the same style truck. Like I said, I really don't care what type it is, but try to pick one and stay with it. So, Darren, you want to bring some of the folks up?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, I'd like to explain to you somewhat of the process, and then I've got the Fire Commission Chairman, Chief Justin McClellan, with me. He also serves on the Apparatus and Equipment Committee, and I've got our Apparatus and Equipment Officer for the county, Billy Lloyd, with me as well. Standardization is an important thing in the fire service. We've been working on doing that for the better part of about 25 or 30 years. We started it in earnest in the middle 90s. That's when we used to have about a dozen different kinds of air packs. We ended up doing tests, and we liked the Scott brand. We standardized to Scott. When you all bought us replacement air packs last year, that is still the brand that we use. They're still the best brand out there. So we did specify the Scott brand. There were several vendors who were able to bid on that who sell the Scott brand. The same thing is true of fire trucks to a degree. The Apparatus and Equipment Committee spends years catering the specifications to our needs in this particular county. We always do in our bid process what's called a performance specification. It is very specific. We name the name of the pump we'd like to have. We name the name of a lot of different things, even gauges and things of that nature that are on those trucks. And our experience has taught us which ones are serviceable, which ones work the best, which ones are there. We bought KME trucks in 1996, and they came into service in this county in 1997. We bought 23 of those trucks at that time. In 2007, which is the year this truck that we need to replace was purchased. We did another purchase. There was more than 7 years there, you can figure out pretty quick. But we did another purchase. And in that purchase, Pierce was the successful vendor. They actually beat all the other vendors by more than $40,000 over the whole total of the bid. In 2016, we did another purchase. Again, Pierce was the successful bidder. Again, I think they left, I can't remember exactly, but it was either between $35,000 and $42,000, so to speak, on the table. That's how much they won the bid by. In the performance spec, any vendor can take exception to what we've asked for, and then the Fire Commission Apparatus Committee looks at that exception, and as long as that vendor is meeting the matter of what we're trying to accomplish and not downgrading in that particular item, they can be accepted. So that when we're doing the large truck purchase, we generally get a number of bids because it's worth their while to go to the trouble to meet the exception rule that we have in the bid that's part of this county's procurement policy too. This was a one-truck buy. All the vendors talk to one another. Everybody knows what's going on as far as who's buying what from whom. They can look at a specification and see if that specification is modeled after a particular truck. I won't stand here and tell you that we start with an A and end with a Z and write those specifications completely. We didn't do that in 1997. We didn't do it in 2007. We didn't do it in 2016. We use a manufacturer's specification as the basis for what we do. It's no different than if somebody's buying a Ford pickup, you're going to use the Ford spec, then you decide what you want out of it. It's a shopping cart, generally, in a manufacturer of that nature. On these fire trucks, it's not so much of a shopping cart. Everything out there is specific. We're one of the few counties that put a dual foam system on our trucks. The best one out there happens to be the one made by Pierce. However, if another vendor ended up being a successful vendor on the trucks, as long as they provide us the data that their foam system will meet the requirements that we want it to meet, we would buy that truck. All the major vendors out there are eligible for us to buy from. Having said that, there is specificity in those specifications, and that is there to protect us as far as the maintenance. I only have 2 maintenance officers. Billy is the officer, and Philip Pegram is the one who assists him. So we've got 2 people out there trying to take care of roughly 130 pieces of rolling stock, of which about 110 are actually fire apparatus. There's thousands of moving parts on those fire trucks. The more standardized we can be, the more efficient their time is spent when they're actually out there doing repairs and maintenance. Electronics and all the other things. Our guys that go out of the office are able to carry parts with them for some small items that they can change to keep Billy and Philip from having to actually go and put hands on that item. So having said that, I'll stop talking now and let you ask me questions. I hope I've answered some of your questions. Mr. Mosteller years ago served on the commission. He was part of when we were trying to standardize. Rudy Carter years ago was chair for a number of times. I spoke with him about this very item of how we tried to standardize, and he was part of that as we've gone through all these years. He used to be chair of this very council. So we've worked a long, long time. The reason we were able to go ahead and have a spec ready to go to this bid package is the Apparatus and Equipment Committee had been working for over 2 years on this very engine spec. They're ready to start on the tanker spec and the rescue truck specs. They're not as complicated. So we'll have all of those ready because in 2023, we're at another 7-year cycle to actually put the bid out with the hope that we'll be buying trucks in the beginning of 2024. That keeps us on our 7-year cycle. So all of those things figure in. These are not just, the vendor that we like maybe sends us a spec and we send that out as the bid. There's a lot of time and effort. That committee meets over and over and over. The Fire Commission voted on these specifications back in the fall of the year, and it was unanimously accepted that this was the specification that we would provide. The Fire Commission met 2 days before this bid came in January. They did meet again this month, and last Thursday night, they accepted that bid, And they wanted to recommend to you all that when you do vote, that you vote to purchase this truck using the specification and the bid that just was received.
Darren, how is the county fleet, what kind of insurance do we have on the, I'm talking the whole fleet?
It comes through the Association of Counties, the regular county insurance.
Well, how, in this particular accident, how did we make out with our insurance company?
They gave us $250,000 on the truck. The truck was a 2007 year model, so it's 13 years old. There is depreciation even on fire trucks. Would I have liked to have had more money? Yes, sir, I would. But now they did replace air packs and a few other things and still gave us $250,000 for the truck itself.
It's prorated by the year of the model of the...
It's prorated by the year, of course, and then they also go out and look at fire truck resale sites. If you remember, when we bought trucks in 2016-17, we sold a bunch of trucks. That's how we got the $250,000 that went to Rich Hill. So they look at those sites. That adjuster, I think he contacted Spartan Fire Apparatus, who is the dealer that we bought it from in 2007, who also is the successful bidder right now. Good. He got a price from them, and he called other vendors as well, and then they try to do basically an average of those. They got prices anywhere from about 180 to 250. They went with the 250 because when they looked at that truck, it had dual foam system on it. It had components on it that made it more valuable than a standard fire truck of that year model that would have been sold. It was a custom model cab.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to make a motion to purchase
No,
this?
we don't know, we don't.
Not today?
No, this is just a workshop.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. They're for Steve. Steve, what does the procurement code say about one bid? Do we have anything stating that we get one bid, we send it out to rebid? How's that stated?
I'd have to go back and look, but I do not believe so. I mean, that's why we have the language in there. If any potential bidder takes exception, they're more than welcome to do so.
I just want to make sure that we're following the procurement code.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't answer that question. I don't
Next.
believe there's a requirement, but I'd have to check.
I do know, excuse me, I do know there is a requirement of a time period before we can tell the vendor, your bid is the winning bid. Kathy told me that. I don't know what the time period is. It's not like a month. It's like a number of days or weeks that vendors do have.
Protest period's only like 10 days.
Yeah, that the vendors can protest if they're not happy.
The second question, Steve, is where will the money come from to cover this cost?
The funding
Yeah.
would come from general fund balance.
And what was that total cost be again? That will be coming, not the $250,000 insurance.
With the $250,000 insurance proceeds, we would still have $367,425. That would
Come
be
from the
if
general
we don't
fund.
prepay. We save $16,000 if we prepay. And
Steve,
otherwise, if we don't prepay, we would just program it into the next year's budget.
And Steve, if we take it out of fund balance, we're still going to have the reserves we need to keep our financials in order.
Chair, I got a comment when you get started.
I can't give you an exact number, but I'm confident Veronica.
Well, Veronica's not here, that's why I'm asking you.
It's kind of like last night.
That's right.
If I'm gonna make any specific requirements on finance, I want to talk to Veronica.
But I mean, you're pretty sure though that we're
Oh, yes,
okay
sir.
in that regard right now?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Mosteller got a
Yeah.
comment or question.
I got a comment here. You know, we're doing a one truck purchase. And when you do one truck purchase and build, a custom built truck, it's gonna cost more than when we do 15. Generally, when you buy them 15 at the time like we do every 7 year, they're gonna get a better price on them. But when you build one, they gotta run that one truck through and build it just that one particular way instead of running 15 through. So we're gonna pay more for this truck than we normally do. This is where I keep coming back with we're approving these rooftops now, and these permits being pulled 3 or 4 years down the road. Fire trucks were costing us $350,000, $400,000. Now they're $650,000. Our ambulances used to be $150,000. Now they're $350,000. This stuff, that's why we got to get, I keep about the inflationary stuff that we got to get in here. But I just want to put my 2 cents in there about this one truck. It's going to cost us more than and normally we would have to pay for
Yeah,
915.
I think, you know, we're just gonna play through the nose. That's the basic thing that's happening. It's because it's a one truck purchase, but this truck costs $670,000. How much, is that a fair price, or what would it normally, if we were doing a bid package, what would it cost?
If we were
Darren?
doing a bid package, we would have taken the number that we had, and I did not run this number for you, so I can't give you what it would be. But we would have taken the number that the trucks cost in 2017 when we paid up front, and we figure anywhere between 5 and 10% a year. There will be some years they do a 2 or 3% increase. There's some years they do a 10% increase. Some of that's driven by EPA standards that change the engine. For instance, when we bought the 2007 trucks, had we been one more year later, they would have gone up $15,000 just because of EPA regulations on the diesel engines, where they changed in 2010. We had to pay that in the 2016 trucks because they all, of course, were after 2010. So there are government things that drive those cost increase some years, but there's usually always a 3 to 5% increase by the manufacturer, just simply because of all the components and the way they increase. Then you compound that over the years, and that's how we come up with a planning figure to tell you all what we probably are going to end up with when we're ready to put out the bid.
Well, I hope that going to Mr. Mostegler's point, that the inflation clauses we're putting in these development agreements take those numbers into consideration.
I would hope so, too.
All right, any more questions? We'll keep this moving. I think we got enough
Do you
information.
need anything from
We
that,
got,
Brian?
I think we're good. We appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, one thing to answer Councilman Blackman's question, got a text from Kim, who's watching from home. Yes, we would still be within limits.
Okay. Discussion of unopened portion of Culp Lansford Road. Mr. Willis, Mr. DeBose.
You skipped one item, I believe, Mr. Chairman.
You skip,
Oh, what did I skip?
priority
Discussion
Indian
of priority Indian.
Oh,
land
this,
development.
I'm sorry, I forgot about Mr. Gilbert. I'm sorry. Discussion of priority Indian land development planning and economic development site. Rox, Burns, and Jamie Gill. I apologize.
You're just trying to move us along real fast.
I'm trying to move.
So we're gonna get through early today.
That's the only way we're gonna get through early.
Well, thank you for thank you for allowing us to talk about this topic here. So, Jamie and I, work pretty closely together on a weekly basis on various matters in Lancaster County, but also certainly in the Indian Land area. And we had a couple projects come up that we started working or having conversations more closely on that we thought were actually pretty important, and wanted to kind of discuss them with the council to see, get some feedback on them, because they're relatively unique, and but they are actually very important. So we want to use this as a quick briefing session and just get some general feedback, not asking for any decisions or just feedback is what we're asking for. So we'll keep this conversation relatively informal, but the two sites that we'd like to chat with you about, one is located on Possum Hollow Road near the intersection of Old Bales, near the Old Bales Business Park. And the second site is on 521 across from the Walmart. The picture I'm showing you there is just for visual effect, so don't, it's not a project building. Both of these sites.
We want one like that.
Yeah, we want that. We want aspirational standard, right? Both sites may come up for a future rezoning, and that's why this is on the agenda tonight. So the first site I want to talk to you about is located at Possum Hollow in Old Bales. So Possum Hollow would be kind of on the lower right-hand corner. Old Bales Road is on the right-hand side, going up to I guess that'd be the northwest. And so this area of the county is what I think what we, as Jamie and I talked about, we kind of view this as sort of a transitional area. You've got a couple neighborhoods in the immediate vicinity, but you also have the Old Bales Business Park located to the north, and you can start to see some of the commercial or industrial buildings on the upper edge of the site. And so we were approached by a residential developer to do a cluster subdivision, medium density residential cluster subdivision on this property. And it's a unique site from the standpoint that you could build a case that it's appropriate for a residential community, but you could also build a case that it's appropriate for industry, light industry, because of its proximity to the business park. And we're all aware that there's a dwindling supply of industrial land in the Indian Land area, and there's always a desire to kind of fill those sites up when they come about. So what we wanted to kind of have as a conversation with you is, we've shared this transitional concept with the residential developer that there may be an argument that this site may be more appropriate for future industry versus residential. But what we'd like to hear from council is, do you think that is a sound position or feedback to share with the developer, or do you think we're just out there in left field thinking that this might be a future industrial site? And I'll ask Jamie to kind of jump in.
Let me ask a question before you move forward. Is it the location of that land right at the North Carolina line that makes it feasible for industry, or what? Because it's right at that
One of
North
the things
Carolina
that
line.
I've said when I've bought
I think she's
projects-
talking about the piece across from Walmart.
Yeah, that piece of
This is
Walmart.
the different piece they're
Okay.
talking about
So we
right
But I
hadn't
think-
now.
gotten to that
But
one
I think
yet.
the concepts are the same with both locations. So from this perspective, you've heard when I've brought projects to you in the last year, Remby, Clickfold Plastics, and there's a demand for these 2 to 5 acre sites in the Indian Land area that can accommodate companies that are looking to maybe get out of lease space, purchase land, construct their own facility that they now will have ownership of, and grow the operation. And we just don't have these sites that exist in the Indian Land area. They've disappeared over the years. We haven't zoned for those. And here's a location that is right next to the Bales Ridge Corber Park, which really does provide a nice extension of that park further south in an area. And remember, in Indian Land, whenever we go through a rezoning to try to accommodate any type of light industrial, we're going to be up against residential. It's inevitable. It's there in every location that could possibly be a light industrial site. And in this case, this makes a lot of sense to try to push this, in our opinion, towards an extension of the Bales Ridge Corporate
I can
Park.
understand it at this location, it's just sort of reasonable, but I was just wondering when I was reading it, why so close, the other location across from Walmart? What makes that so desirable?
We'll get to that because it's just
Mr.
different.
Chairman,
I
make
don't
a comment.
see,
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr.
I have relatives that own part of this property we're discussing, so I don't know if I need to recuse myself. I'm not going to make any comments on it, but being this is a workshop, I don't know how that is
Being a
affected.
workshop, Mr. DeBose, would you comment, please?
Since there's no votes to be taken and no commentary by Mr. Carnes, I don't know that it's necessary that he recuse himself. If he wanted to do so, though, I don't think it would be inappropriate for him to recuse himself.
I'll let you make that decision.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to comment on it one way or the other through the whole discussion. Then if it does come before council, then I will recuse myself and not be in the room.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Carnes.
think one thing I would like to point out about this site, and I don't know because I haven't spoken with the families that own the property in a few years, but it was probably about 2 or 3 years ago that I had a meeting with some of them there at one of the homes across the street there on Old Bales. And at that time, there was interest in possibly going like industrial with this property. So they weren't at that time had any kind of objection to the property going this way. I think it's now that there's an opportunity there to do something with the property that is on the residential side, and that's why that's being pursued. But in the past, it hasn't been something where they were open to not doing industrial out on that property.
Well, I'd just make a comment that, you said it was going to be clustered in residential, but I think in the Indian Land area, I think it is critical that we have a mix of business and residential. And I spoke against the cluster development last night because the cluster development is not going to support itself. However, the industrial or the business will.
good point, Councilman Graham. I think also, when you look at, and we can talk about this on another topic that's later in the meeting, but, when we're looking at the issues about residential growth and the cost it imposes on the county, to go from a less intensive residential use to a more intensive residential use when there may be other options out there, that's something that we should give consideration to. There may be some other things that work better for this property from a cost standpoint for the county's perspective.
Absolutely. And again, this is, it's not the intent of staff, for the economic development or planning staff to come forward with every potential rezoning and share it with you. We think this is just a unique circumstance, and it's important. It's a priority site, and that's why we just want to kind of see if you agreed with us. And we believe that its proximity to the park and the dwindling supply of available land for industry, particularly light industrial type industry, it warranted maybe just an early conversation or with council, and that's why we wanted to do it. It was important for us. We thought it'd be important for you, and that's why we're here discussing it.
I think another 100 acres in that general area of the county would lead to probably 20 more businesses like Remby and Clickfold over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. So, I mean, what the sense I'm getting is that we're not out in left field on planet Mars, with this idea that this could potentially be viable land for future industry. So, I think that's all we wanted, was just to kind of have a conversation on it, not asking for any firm positions.
I like the idea.
Well, I know time is short, so I'm going to jump into the next site, if you don't mind, and we'll go ahead and talk about Elmsbrook. And so Elmsbrook's a little bit more complex, as Ms. McGriff was actually kind of articulating earlier. And so Elmsbrook is, for those that aren't familiar, is in the far edge of Lancaster County off 521, between 521 and Harrisburg Road. Older single-family community. Roughly 40 residential lots in total, with about 60 acres if you factor in the roads, right-of-ways that are there. There's a real estate broker that is working with most of the residents of the community. I think there's just a greater desire with the Walmart development and other things change in development on Harrisburg. The character of the land's changing. It's getting busier. There used to be country. Now it's it's our biggest commercial corridor, if you will. And so the quality of life is a little different than it used to be. We understand there's a lot of cut-through traffic through the neighborhood, so a lot of the residents are ready to kind of transition to something else and see an opportunity for commercial development in the future. So we were approached about a potential rezoning on Elmsbrook for an individual piece, and it just got us thinking and talking. And what seemed really simple, when we started talking about it more, it's like, well, wait a minute, this isn't so simple. Let's kind of flesh this out a little more, and you know what? Let's actually share this with council and see if they agree with our train of thought or not. So I just want to get everyone again just intimately familiar with the location. Just a very simple map. The bright red line is the state line for North Carolina and South Carolina. So Elmsbrook is located on the western side of 521. Again, with a call out there. Again, just trying to show you the proximity. It sits directly across from the Walmart Supercenter. Mr. Carnes, I know you know it better than anyone, as well as in immediate proximity to Red Ventures. The big bright star there is basically the Ballantyne Business Park. The site sits roughly around, from road mileage, around 3 miles from the Ballantyne Business Park, about less so from the future Novant Hospital that's going to be built in far south Charlotte as well. So again, we see just the location, a very prime location at the gateway of South Carolina and Lancaster County. Again, this is one of the first things people are going to see when they come across the straight line, and so we feel like that should be important in itself. But also, this is again our most intense kind of commercial, in many respects, almost an economic development corridor, given the intensity of it. And so again, we think it needs closer eyes when we see opportunities in this area. Anything to add before I transition?
Well, I think, we didn't have the luxury of having, a development like they had in Ballantyne with one developer that came in and really built that out. So you see a consistent theme as you drive up 521 to get to 45 in terms of look and feel. But when you're heading south towards Lancaster and you're starting to approach the state line to cross into the state, into the county, you see a really nice smaller professional park on the right-hand side. And then you come to this basically property that has 60 homes in it, and you think, okay, well, what could be redeveloped there? And would we want to continue that theme to make that good first impression that people get, because that is probably the highest traveled entryway into the county. And so we want to make sure that what we do there really sets the proper tone and image for coming into Lancaster County. And it has to be a good project that shows well.
Absolutely, that's well put. So again, just you've seen the big broad overview, just want to zoom in a little further for again those aren't familiar. Elmsbrook is the area outlined in yellow. Again, directly across the street, you see the Walmart Supercenter. You see the edge of Red Ventures on the very lower section. Again, just highlighting the community, and you can kind of see its location there between Harrisburg and Charlotte Highway. So as part of this, it's again as Jamie and I started thinking about this, or we felt that this site, in order to that it represented possibly if commercially developed, it could be the most valuable commercial real estate in Lancaster County. Again, proximity to the Walmart Supercenter, proximity to the Ballantyne Business Park and the amount of commerce that occurs there. Proximity to a future hospital that's going to be breaking ground in the coming months. Also another hospital not too far south in Lancaster County. And so if done properly and if master planned, we feel that this could be create a lot of benefit for Lancaster County and its residents. And so that's why we felt it was important to come here. But in terms of what initiated this conversation was was a request actually just to rezone one out of the 40 parcels that actually is the one sitting across from the Walmart for a gas station. And the application has not come in, but as we're told, it's coming in the coming days, and that there's a desire to build a gas station and possibly like a fast food restaurant behind it. And I'll show you that concept here. So again, to show you this, that's the outline of the gas station, and then potentially, again, a fast food establishment on the remaining of the parcel behind. And while on the surface of it, you would look at this and say, well, okay, makes sense. There's a gas station across the street at Walmart. It's a commercial area, commercial rezoning, easy peasy, right? But there is, we do have a concern looking at the long term and the big picture, which is what we're, charged to do, that if this Elmsbrook starts developing piecemeal, parcel by parcel, one, you're not going to achieve the image that Jamie mentioned, but you also won't realize the full potential of the parcel if it, as if it were master planned for something like office or something even
Right.
better.
You start chipping away at it piece by piece like this, you really do set the tone from the first project that goes in. It's always what happens. First project sets the tone for the rest of the development. And if you go in with something like a gas station, nothing against gas stations, but does that not set the tone for how the rest of the property will be developed?
I don't think I would want to see piecemealing up there. It's not attractive at all.
You mentioned a word that I like, master plan.
Yeah.
But I also, Mr. Honeycutt, you'll like it, this one because it relates to the trash along that stretch of road. It is abysmal, and it is the first thing that people notice about Lancaster County when they come in there is all the trash along that road. So I like the master plan, and I like what you're telling us.
I
The
agree.
last time we picked up trash up there, I did about 50 or 60 yards from the red light there at Walmart for 2 hours.
I completely agree with the staff's vision of what this property should be. I know we don't need to be expressing an opinion on a rezoning. I wouldn't think that hadn't even been bought before this council, but it might possibly be bought.
I would say that there are 5 gas stations within a mile of this property.
Yeah.
And with all these conversations we've had, if it's
And
something like
there's umpty dump fast food trash along the road.
and with all these conversations we've had, whether it's the project you see on the screen, and if that one goes away, there'll be something behind it. And so we're just, want to make sure we've got the we're not on planet Mars when we talk to folks about the concepts that we think are important for the county. And that's why we just want to check in. Again, we think these are priority sites, but also unique situations that warrant kind of getting your ear a little bit. So I think we've heard some good feedback here. And if you have any further questions, Mr.
I have a question. I know that this development had covenants or something on the property there. Has that been negotiated on how those are going to be broken, or are they just hoping they're going to break it and not get taken to court, or?
As I mentioned earlier, there's a broker that is representing like most of the property owners. They have taken the covenants to a real estate attorney and had them analyzed, and it is that attorney's position that the covenants are no longer in effect or enforceable. That in essence, since the neighborhood's inception, they have never been enforced, and that is again the legal advice they're receiving is that it's no longer in effect.
And what I would recommend on this, and Mr. Fox agrees with it, but, you know, one of our policies we have is we do not, whether it's a residential subdivision or if it's an industrial park like a McMillan, there's covenants that govern those parks. Bales Ridge has them, that those are up to the tenants and up to whoever is that governing board, and so that's separate from county. So I personally haven't delved into that just because I'm like, this is not something we're going to touch. They need to work that out. Hopefully they have, but it's not something we would be looking at.
All right. Thank y'all.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Anything else on this? Now let's go down to E, discussion of open road portion of Culp Lansford Road. Mr. Willis and Mr. DeBose.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, been a while back, but had a request from one of the adjacent property owners about what would it take to have the unopened portion of Culp Lansford Road quitclaimed to the adjacent property owners. And in your handout, you'll see that Old Lansford Road, Culp Street runs off of that, and this is just to the east of Memorial Park Drive. If you go up Culp Street and turn to your right, which would be easterly direction, Culp Lansford Road is a small paved road, several houses back in there. It's been paved for a long, long time. To the left, there's a small section that's platted out for a roadway that has never been opened. All the houses that are adjacent to it have road access either off Old Lansford or off Culp Street. Don't know of any reason why we would not try to accommodate this, but that does involve quitclaims. It's legal work, so I would turn it over to John at this point.
So, as I believe I've informed council in the past, roads come into county road systems through the process of dedication. That's either done explicitly by a deed, dedication on a plat, or sometimes counties acquire prescriptive rights. In this instance, it appears that there was an attempt to dedicate by plat. In other words, developers list a section of roadway as a public right-of-way. The county starts working it, boom, it's a county road. But dedication requires either an express acceptance or an implied acceptance. In this instance, the county never opened this section of road at all. There's no express or implied acceptance by the county at any point of this section as a public road based on my research. So that said, the administrators thought to get this off the books at the request of the property owners next to it, I think is wholly appropriate, because the county might not actually own it or have any right in it. Quitclaim is the appropriate means of conveyance, because you're saying, I don't know if I own it or not, but if I do, you can have it. If someone else complains about it, it's not my problem. So I've got draft quitclaim deeds prepared and draft ordinance prepared for y'all's consideration at the next council meeting. Of course, this conveyance would essentially be for no consideration again, because I'm not even sure that the county technically owns the roadway at all. I will note that the road is approximately, I don't know, 25, 30 feet based on the scale, and the lot it has no value as an independent lot. I don't believe it would be developable under our ordinance. If a formal road abandonment occurred, title typically vests to the center line in the roadway to the adjacent property owners. That's the manner in which this would be quitclaimed. Adjacent property owners would just get a quitclaim to the center line of the existing unopened portion of the road. Happy to answer any questions that y'all have regarding any legal concerns.
My only question is, there's the 3 parcels that adjoin it, have they all been notified?
So I understand one of them approached the administrator about this, again, until there was some feedback from council or desire to proceed. We were going to hold off on notifying all of them. I can certainly reach out to the property owners. I don't think many of them would have any issue with gaining a little bit more side yard or rear yard, though.
I would just want all 3
Correct.
to be notified.
Correct. And that was the intention.
We would have to notify them, generally, John, you can cover this. The quitclaim goes to the center line of the unopened road.
Correct. The quitclaim would go to the center line of the unopened road. And of course, there's no obligation on anyone that's deeded property to actually accept the deed to the property or record it. Theoretically, if a property owner did not want to acquire this property, they could not record the deed or refuse to accept the deed. In which case, a portion of the road would still be in limbo, but presumably, people are, again, in agreement with gaining a little bit of ownership to additional property that's currently kind of unused and uncontrolled as far as trespass, litter. I mean, there are numerous concerns that might be alleviated for these neighboring property owners.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, let's move down and continue discussion of ordinance 2021-1705 regarding adopting procedures in imposition,
Mr. Chairman.
calculation, impact fees. Go ahead, Mr. Willis.
I was going to say, at your request, we have staff here tonight to talk about some of the projects. When we talked about the impact fee ordinance last night, we really didn't get into the part that carries out how do you maintain levels of service. That's the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. As you'll recall, when we had our very first attempt at an impact fee ordinance, you had CIP mixed in with that. We found out pretty quickly, talking to Ms. Brule, no, that's not the way you do these things. Keeps you out of trouble. So the CIP is separate. And what I've asked Kim, what you have in front of you, is Kim has pulled out of the CIP, what are those projects that would be funded through impact fee revenue to help maintain the levels of service that are called for in the ordinance. For EMS, it's additional ambulances. For the fire service, it's both apparatus and fire stations. For Parks and Recreation, it's the regional sports complex park. And for the sheriff's office, it's the sheriff's substation. So we have representatives from all of those agencies here this evening. If you have any questions about, what would they envision, I would note that one of the things we're going to have to be very careful of, for example, the ambulances, the ones that are required through an impact fee, if we move forward on this, we're going to have to work to make sure they stay in that service area. We can't rotate them out and move them somewhere else in the county. They're required through the impact fee. They stay there. Now, they could certainly move between Station 4, Station 9, Station 8, Station 10, and, no problem there. But they got to stay in that area. Fire stations and the regional park and sheriff's substation, they're not moving. Don't have to worry about those.
Let me ask you a question about the ambulances, Steve.
Yes, sir.
What happens when they basically age out the fleet and they have to be replaced, but they're still in condition that they could be a backup ambulance? Would they still have to be used?
They
in
would
that
be used
service
as a
area?
backup ambulance in that area. They have to stay in that area unless we actually take them out of the fleet. They're retired out of the fleet.
And I assume if they're sold, then money has to go back to the impact fees or to that area.
I don't know. I would recommend it, but I don't know that's a legal requirement. I think, kind of an ethical thing, yeah, you need to sink it back into the Panhandle area. The other component we have that we requested tonight is Jamie Gilbert, because one of the things with impact fees is, it's not just residential, it's commercial, and it's industrial property. So, want to make sure council had an understanding of, potential impacts on that. So, Mr. Chairman, I guess at this point, if you want to.
All right, I'll get him in just a minute. I don't know if I'm the only one that's got this concern, but, I'm looking at impact fees for high growth areas. And I can understand from the city of Lancaster up north, because we're getting sewer is coming, and as you can see, developers are coming. But I would like for council to consider the Camp Creek and like the Shiloh Zion area, to me, shouldn't be included. There's not sewer, there's no future sewer plan up there. And it's gonna be hard to tell somebody building up near the Monroe line that they're gonna have to pay $2,000 for an impact fee for Indian land.
The only comment I would have on that, Camp Creek, or ultimately, of course, it's council's decision. It's Polly's decision on what areas you want to cover. The reason that I would recommend that Shiloh Zion and Riverside stay in the sports complex. That's, it's strange, but those lots, the lots directly on 521 are part of Shiloh Zion, but the backside's Riverside, and it actually, the difference between the fire districts runs back on property lines. It's going to split that
Camp
part.
Creek could be taken out without,
It would not impact the sports complex, no, sir.
okay.
The only comment I'd make about that, Chairman, you said that the impact fee would be for Indian land, but actually the impact fee would be for Camp Creek too. They'd be eligible for that. So I think that's a little misleading, in my opinion.
They're not in the fire stations that will be built will be in the Panhandle.
Yeah, but I also noticed that
At least initially, that is what's proposed in the CIP. Council is free to amend that CIP and, say, okay, we want to include Shiloh Zion.
I would just like to know how many houses have been built in Camp Creek
Riverside's in
area.
trouble. Camp Creek's in a world of trouble on some of their fire stations. I think, Councilman, you're familiar with that, having been a fire chief. But the CIP has not been adopted yet. This is what's in the proposed CIP. But again, it's really kind of a separate issue because that's what maintains that level of service the ordinance discusses. But it's also an integrated part. You can't really talk about one without knowing what's in the other. So that's why I'd asked Kim, pull out of the CIP, what are we proposing to fund with impact fee revenue?
Well, if you're going to include Camp Creek in it, you need to fund that station down there too.
I agree with that.
Yes, sir. We certainly can.
Okay.
It'll take a while, but it'll get there.
All right, okay, any other questions on that at this time?
I mean, I'd like to leave it in, but I just think that'd be good for the long term. I know we're going to review it every 5 years anyway, but I think right now it'd be good to leave it in.
Jamie, do you mind coming forward? And Mike Billadew's back there. I'm going to ask him to, I guess, Jamie, you'll ask him to speak the impact on the commercial type stuff, or I'll ask him.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with the impact fees on houses. 2000s, I don't think you've heard a developer, any of them, hesitate to pay that. My concern is the effect or the impact it would have on commercial and the other revenue that we would possibly lose, sales tax and property taxes every year at a high rate. That if it goes through like it is. And we can't separate, we have to do houses and commercial at the same ratio, right? Mr. Willis?
Yes, sir. To the extent that, council is free to set different ratios, and I'll just pick on them.
We can set different ratios for
If
You can
really,
set
really like
different
me,
ratios for
You
commercial.
can set 100% on his, you can set 50% on Darren's. But
So-
you
so
have
we
to
can't?
treat all three categories, residential, commercial, industrial, the same on that percentage. One of the things we looked at early on, there's just not a mechanism under current state law to say we're going to treat commercial, industrial differently than residential. So your ability to set different rates is on the different categories of service: fire, EMS, law enforcement, parks and rec. And part of that John covered last night. That's why we're proposing to bring 4 different ordinances, so you have that flexibility.
All right, Mr. Gilbert?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the economic development perspective, and I want to, I guess, touch on the fact that when we look at commercial, which includes industrial, office, and retail, the way the property taxes are done in this state, it is really unfair to the business community. Now, that's not our fault, but that's the table that has been set for the business community. Residential pays 4%, commercial 6%, industrial going to be 9%. So it's very punitive to the business community in this state. The reason we're even having a discussion about impact fees is because of the residential growth. It is not because most of us believe that office, industrial, and retail are causing us to have a strain on our delivery of services here. It is the residential that is not paying its fair share. So from an economic development perspective, I fully get the need to look at ways to address the fact that we need residential to be paying for the costs they're placing on this county. My concern is that industrial, office, and particularly retail already pay a significant amount of money into the revenue stream, and they take very little out in the way of services. It's almost like if we go the route of impact fees, if we don't do something to address those 3 areas on the commercial side, what we're going to see is, I call this the war on residential, which it is. Residential has caused a number of problems for us over the years, and it's not improving. It's getting worse year by year. But that war on residential that we're going to take in the way of impact fees is going to have collateral damage. And that collateral damage is to the business community if we don't have ways to adequately address it. And so the way that I would look at this is, if we are going to go down that road with impact fees, what I would recommend is we certainly address the cost of doing business in this state for our industrial and office projects. Now, we can, if the impact fees go into effect, we can do this, we can, through the fee in lieu of taxes and special source revenue credits, we can mitigate the impact that those fees may have on them. That could be a higher SSRC in the first year or the second year, but there's a way to address it. What I'm concerned about is on the retail side, and that's why I brought Mike Bilodeau here to speak on what the changes that are going on in the retail world and how that's affecting the ability to attract more retail development in this county. But I would say this: if we are going to go the impact fee route, we might want to consider for larger retail projects, whether they're a Promenade or, say, a phase 2 at Promenade, phase 2 at Redstone, we would want to maybe consider, we've never done this, but doing something similar in terms of a fee in lieu of tax agreement or special source revenue credit to help them with the enormous cost of these fees. Because right now you're dealing with a COVID-19 world, and you're dealing with discussions in Washington, D.C. right now about minimum wage going up to $15 an hour. Now, that's not going to hurt industrial, and it's not going to hurt office, but it is going to hurt the retail sector that's already struggling. You add on another layer of cost to them, and I think you're going to see a real stall in retail development in this county over the next 10 years, unless, again, we do something on our side that we have the ability to do, which we do address it through, say, a fee agreement of some type for projects that we consider to be significantly important to the county. And I'll bring Mike up from MPV, who has been one of our leading developers in the county in terms of retail projects and office projects.
Mind if I take this off? Good afternoon. My name is Mike Bilodeau. I'm with MPV Properties. We've been active in Lancaster County for 22 years, developing 5 or 6 large-scale office, industrial projects, retail projects. Been involved in several multifamily projects. I did a little back-of-envelope calculation. There's about $600 million of commercial development on the projects that we've developed over the last 20 years. Jamie called me yesterday and said, would you mind just coming and speaking briefly to council about impact fees? And I said I would. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it, but I just thought I would give some topical observations to it. For what it's worth, I have done nothing for 22 years, nothing outside of Lancaster County. Every single thing I've done for 22 years is get up every day and try to figure out how to generate commercial development in Lancaster County. So I like to think my long-term goals are aligned with the county's. I think we've been good stewards of the county, and I think the county's been exceptionally good to us. And so long-term, I feel like we have each other's interests in mind. That being said, I recognize reasonable people can disagree on the issue of impact fees. I personally, in light of really, and you really took my thunder, Jamie, was what I was going to kind of say, but impact fees, I'm here to voice my opposition to them because I think they are going to be wrong for the county. And I really identified 3 points that I root my opposition. The first is they're counterproductive to Lancaster's financial and well-being and balance. Secondly, the current climate suggests now is not the right time. And lastly, Lancaster County currently disproportionately burdens commercial development, and further cost burdens are going to exacerbate that. So let's just talk about the first one, counterproductive to Lancaster County's financial well-being. I'm reminded in 2007, I was asked to be the guest speaker at a Lancaster County annual luncheon. I gave a speech in which I cited a Clemson study that said for every $1 of new tax revenue generated by a new resident of Lancaster County, it costs the county $1.23. So for new people moving in, the county loses money. Well, how does the county balance their books? Well, they balance it off commercial. And it's because of the 4%, the 6%, and then the exemption from the school tax on that. Well, that places a very competitive disadvantage on commercial development. But what happens when you raise the cost of commercial development even more? You've already got a very uncompetitive situation. You want to raise that. Well, one of 2 things are going to happen. You're either going to not see commercial projects occur with the same level of velocity as has been done before, or a developer is going to scale back what it is they're planning to do. There's no magic formula to commercial real estate. You look at the cost of developing a project, delivering a service, whatever that's going to be, in this case, a retail project, an office building. The market is set by not me, not anyone in this room, but by conditions well beyond any control that we have. So if we raise the cost of it, okay, of offering that service, then I either got to charge a higher rate, which I can't do because the market determines that, or I can shave costs off. So you're going to see a reduction in the number of projects, but you're also going to get in the business of what I say, you're in the used car, building a used car. If you haven't had a chance to see the court at Redstone, it's Red Ventures multifamily project that sits up on their campus. We were asked to fee develop that project on their behalf. I've been actively involved for the last 3.5 years. It is without question the nicest project from a multifamily standpoint, not only in Lancaster County, I would dare say in South Charlotte, even venturing up into the South End area. It's a fantastic project. If you were to impose a fee to build a project like that, you'd have to go into that project and start scaling it back, because right now it's very hard to make economics on multifamily projects work, even though the county wants those projects. So do you want to be in the business as a county? Do you want to be setting policy that you know is going to yield less projects or force developers to compete on price only? First thing. Secondly, now is not the time. You know, there's 2 things going on right now that are massively affecting, in a negative way, commercial real estate. And the first thing is e-commerce and Amazon. If anyone saw the earnings last week, Amazon reported quarterly earnings of $256 billion. Last year, so that equates to $1.4 trillion. Last year, it was like $750 billion. $600 billion. They're up 40%. Those hundreds of billions of dollars used to go into brick and mortar businesses. Okay? That is not happening right now. We own, undoubtedly, the #1 retail location in Lancaster County at the intersection of 160 and 521. We've got a $50 million retail project, Redstone, up and running, movie theater closed, unhelpful. And trying to get traction on phase 2 as a junior anchor and big box anchor projects in light of e-commerce is incredibly challenging. And it's not just here in Lancaster County, it's across the country. So you have a tremendous amount of headwinds taking place in the retail industry. I don't think the answer to that is to impose more costs. That'd be my first observation. Secondly, COVID-19 has eviscerated the office market in a generational way. Go to Indialand right now. It's kind of a ghost town. There's office building after office building. Red Ventures employees haven't been there since March. So it looks like they may not be there for the whole rest of the year. Now, they're doing well as a company. They're all working from home. But what does that mean going forward? If you read, some of these industry journals, and what they think is going to happen is the fundamental shift as a result of COVID-19 is going to force companies to figure out ways to employ their people in the most aggressive remote fashions. If you want to be a computer programmer working for Silicon Valley, but you want to live in Idaho, you're going to end up living in Idaho if that company wants you. So what's going to happen, is you're going to jumble the competitive landscape. You're not just going to be competing against Charlotte for office projects, you're going to be competing with other cities. So you have to put your best foot forward from a competitive standpoint. But COVID-19 has a dramatic effect, and how it's going to reshape the office industry going forward, we don't really know. But I would say to that, increasing the cost burden is probably not in your long-term interest. And then lastly, the current fee and tax structure in commercial development is imbalanced and unfair. And I think impact fees will worsen that situation. It is not.
Say that again, please.
Impact, the competitive,
Back up a statement too.
the current fee and tax structure on commercial development is imbalanced, and I would say unfair. And impact fees could worsen that situation. I'm not sure, it isn't necessarily a given that if you raise taxes, you'll get more revenue. The question you have to ask yourself as policymakers is, what is going to happen if I raise the cost of developing office buildings, industrial buildings, retail projects, and multifamily? How is that going to impact the future tax streams to this county? Is it going to increase them? On the surface, it's intuitively, if you think, well, of course, you get higher taxes, you're going to get more fees. But if I reduce the velocity of that, and I reduce the cost of those, then that doesn't necessarily translate into more money. So it's just something to think about. I did a little comparison. I think it's worth sharing because sometimes data is more compelling than anything I could say. And this is just something very quick. If you don't mind, I'd like to just hand them out. What I did was put a little, I think I got one right here. Yeah, thank you. This first page, I just compiled the permit fees on commercial property in Lancaster County, and I compared them to Mecklenburg County. And I did that across different values of projects. Well, this is just to see how do we stack up, because really what you're doing is you're evaluating policy, put yourself in a competitive position, both internally but also against surrounding jurisdictions. As you can see from this, in Mecklenburg County, going across the top, I show $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, $20, $40 million. The permit fees are a function of the value of the project, which tapers down as the project cost goes up. In Mecklenburg County, for a $40 million project, the permit fees, combined with the review fees, are roughly $94,000. In Lancaster County, that same project is $330,000. So over 300% more to review a set of plans in the right to proceed in Lancaster County than it is in Mecklenburg County. Impact fees will exacerbate that situation. Impact fees also, impact fees, in my opinion, will jeopardize the balance necessary from the county standpoint with respect to ad valorem taxes. We recognize that residential does not carry the cost burden associated with them. Shifted to commercial. There is no commercial project, in my opinion, and just for the record, this is my opinion, what I'm saying here. There are no projects more desirable from a cost return standpoint to the county than properly done multifamily projects. By way of example, I just pulled this today off your tax records. This just compares the enclave at Bales Ridge. I pulled just one house out of Fox Ridge, which is a project that sits just behind it. The enclave sits on 20 acres. Fox Ridge, I'm not sure how many acres it is. I think it's over 100 acres. In 2020, the ad valorem taxes paid by the enclave at Bales Ridge are $430,000. This $350,000 house at Fox Ridge paid $2,195. To get the same amount of revenue from Fox Ridge that you generate from a 20-acre project, you've got to support 100 or approve 196 homes. At 1.5 home, oh, I'm sorry, 130 homes. With 1.5 homes per acre, that results in, I'm sorry, it's 196 homes over 130 acres. So 196 homes at Fox Ridge will generate for the county the same amount of tax revenue that the enclave at Bales Ridge does. Now, what kind of social cost does Fox Ridge have for the county relative to the enclave? Well, 130 acres costs a heck of a lot more to provide police protection, fire protection, emergency protection, water, sewer, and most importantly, schools. There are very few children in the multifamily projects that are in Lancaster County, very small. In fact, the Red Ventures project, we put 8 3-bedrooms out of 260 units. They're not geared towards children. There's been a complete shift in the market towards who's renting them. Very small burden on the tax system, yet it pays the commercial property. I point this out purely to just give you an idea, in case you weren't aware, of how much revenue some of these projects currently generate, both from a permit standpoint, but also from an operational standpoint. And if you jeopardize that development by imposing higher costs, these are some of the revenues that could be jeopardized. To sum it all up, there's an old axiom: if you want more of something, make it less expensive. And if you want commercial development to continue, I don't think the answer is to raise its cost. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And just conclusion from the economic development perspective with what Mike was talking about, again, my position would be, I know one office and industrial, you all have done a good job of supporting those projects, and I think we can work through the impact fees on that. On the retail side, that's going to have to be something we consider also for those projects if we want to see them moving forward, because the cost will be astronomical for them. And in this world of which we're dealing with right now, again, the transition from retail to online, from in-person to online, and also with the COVID-19, we may have to do something, and that something would be looking at some agreements for those projects as well. So happy to take any questions you all may have. And
Well, I'd just like to say I'm certainly glad that Mike only had one night to think about his comments. Otherwise, we might be here till breakfast time tomorrow if he'd had more time to think. But I think the chairman has asked for building permit fees and a comparison there.
Yeah, and what the impact fees, we need some comparisons of, what our building permit fees are on a grocery store, on a restaurant, on a 10,000 square foot retail, so we can see what these fees are.
Yes,
And we need a comparison to our surrounding jurisdictions
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
looking at Fort Mill, I see where, we're using it as a basis for comparison on. One thing just to mention, obviously, this is a policy question. The state law does not allow you to differentiate between residential, industrial, commercial. Wish it did, it doesn't. To Mike's point, particularly on the taxes, is South Carolina tax law unfair and inequitable? Yeah, nobody's disputing that. Not anything we can do. I would note that council does have some potential options if you choose to look at them. We don't do a business license. So, some counties that have impact fees, but the first year or two, they do a reduction in business license to offset that. We don't have one, so there's nothing to offset. County council, way before I came over from the county, I was still with the city at the old Economic Development Corporation, adopted a position, they don't do incentives for commercial retail, just don't. That's come up once or twice since I've been here, no change in position. That said, if council were to choose to do so, there's absolutely nothing preventing you from doing an SSRC. Now fee and lieu, Jamie, of course, will tell you, you've got certain requirements for investment jobs. You've got to meet that. SSRCs are discretionary on the part of council. If you want to expand the use of SSRCs in an effort to offset, maybe do a 1 or 2 year type scenario, you certainly can. That's a potential option, but it's a policy decision council would have to make.
Yeah, I asked for some comparisons, and we need that. We need to, how much is it gonna be on a motel? And, because, we can tell what it is on a house, but we really need to see.
That's why you have the 1,000, per 1,000 square foot.
Yeah.
Would note, Kim and Colin are working on that, so we'll have that for you by second reading.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention, there are potential options if council were to choose that. And again, whether we even pursue this or not, policy decision of council.
Well, I think it's useful to know the options, because I think,
Yeah,
like I've said before, commercial is an integral part of Lancaster County's success.
We won't have second reading till we get all this information, and we can actually discuss it. Can we actually discuss it at the council without having it on the agenda for?
We need to have it on the agenda.
It'd have to be on for second reading,
Sure.
or it would have to be another workshop.
No, I mean, you can discuss it at second reading. You're not required to pass second reading. You can talk about it and then just say, we'll put it off.
Can
till the next
defer,
meeting.
okay, all right.
We'll certainly do that. The one thing that I would note Kim and Colin are working on is strictly just building permit revenue. One thing that Mike mentioned, it's a heavy impact when you look at the benefit of retail is sales tax. That varies so much between different locations. It's impossible to predict. But it is something just to keep in the back of your mind. It's not just property tax. Sales tax is a huge concern as well.
And Mike, I did have a little attempt at humor there with you, but I appreciate your comments. I really do. I was just trying to be a little funny.
I would say that, to Mike's point, Pam and I live at the court at Redstone, and right now they're about 44% leased up, and I think they have about 10 or 12 children that live there, and they're all younger right now, so they may not even be here by the time they get to school age. I saw Judd this morning as I was leaving, and he said that I think out of the 44% that's leased up, only about 10% of that is people that actually work at Red Venture. All the rest of it, there's a surprising number of older couples that are in the building.
All right, we did it by 6 o'clock.
Well, how do you
Anything
know?
else? Did I miss anything?
No, sir, I just want to say thank y'all. Just, from a staff perspective, I think it's really beneficial, particularly in Rox's case. Having the full council here and getting full council review and feedback on some of these, I think it's been very beneficial. I just want to thank y'all for looking at the committee, the whole concept.
All right.
Just keep using that word master plan.
That's 2 words, Mr. Graham, not 1 word, 2 words.
Well, I'm from Ireland. I can spell it whatever way I want to.
You say the word, Mr.
Do I
Chairman.
have a motion to adjourn this workshop?
Chairman,
Mr. Honeycutt?
I make the motion, we adjourn these proceedings.
Mr. Honeycutt
I'm
made a
going to
motion.
wait until 6 o'clock to second
Mr.
it.
Honeycutt made a motion at 5:54. Do I have a second from somebody at 5:54?
I'll second
What
it.
an audience.
I'll second it. Go ahead.
Second for Mr. Graham. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Thank y'all for coming and what you do for this county. We appreciate it.